Welcome to First Time for Everything, a podcast for curious people. I'm your host, Danny Elliott. I've toured the world as a backing vocalist for some of the biggest names in music, owned a prop rental business, ran a vintage boutique out of a camper I renovated, and I've had a lot of firsts in my life. I created this podcast in hopes of inspiring you to take a chance on something you've been wanting to try for the first time. We're going to discover a lot of cool stuff together, and I'm so happy you're here. Getting closer. Hello, first timers. Today I'm talking with my awesome friend, author, poet, and advocate, Lindsey Frazier, about her soon-to-be released memoir, Oh Love, Come Close. Lindsey's story is authentic, beautiful, difficult, redemptive, and like all of us, evolving. Lindsey has had pieces published before, but this is her first book, and I thought it would be interesting to sit down with her and talk about what the process of writing a book, specifically a book of nonfiction, is really like. I'm going to read a quote about her book from her website to give you a glimpse into Lindsey's story. Oh Love, Come Close explores the emotional wounds that fragmented a woman's identity and the retracing of steps needed to pick up the pieces left behind. Her sexuality, spirituality, fidelity, and a complicated past. Frazier unearths her buried wounds and finds that in order to live fully, to fully love and be loved, she has to reclaim all the pieces of herself, no matter how painful they might be. So be ready to be totally shocked, but we talk about the never-ending wisdom of big magic yet again. I promise it's not the only book I've ever read. I've read Lindsey's book too. We also talk about how to make time for what's important to you, and like our girl Glennon Doyle says, doing it scared. I hope all of you current and future writers enjoy first time writing a book. So today we have my girl Lindsey Frazier with me. I'm so excited to have you here. Lindsey is the author of her upcoming memoir, Oh Love, Come Close, coming out January
31st.
31st.
Crazy.
I know. It's been so cool to just kind of watch this process and this journey of you going from like writing it to now it's about to be out in the world.
Yes, girl. It has been a very long journey. It's been 10 years, actually.
I was gonna ask like how long it's been from like, well, we'll go back first and then we'll circle back to that. But like, did you always know that you were going to write a book, or like when did you first become or kind of realize that you were a writer?
So this is crazy. I've been asked this a few times, and no. The answer is no. It's kind of comical. So growing up, I was not great in school. I'm just gonna be very honest. I had a really hard time. I usually ended up getting people to write my papers for me. I did not read my first book until I was in my 20s. And so the fact that I'm a writer, one, completely blows the mind of my parents. But two, me too. Like I never thought this would be my future. So kind of let me tell you the how it started. So you actually will read this in the story, but there was a time in my life where I was meeting with a therapist, and I'm a very open processor, and it was like session 3 maybe. And she reaches down next to her and she grabs like a journal. It looks like a journal. And she hands it to me at the end of our session. And she's like, "This is for you." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." Like thinking to myself, what am I going to do with this? I was not one to keep a diary, writing down my thoughts. I didn't really know what to say. Like, "Dear diary, today
Yeah,
sucked.
totally.
Love, Lindsey." Like,
Yeah.
so she gave me this and she was like, "I can see you're processing a lot and you should write it down." And so I took it home, and probably a few weeks later, I would say that I had it completely full. And what's beautiful about it is I finally found the freedom to get out all the things that I felt like I had hidden. So
Mm.
like that were oppressing me, right? Like all these deep, dark secrets that I felt like I could tell nobody. I finally had a safe place to share those things. So when I was all finished, I can visualize this moment. I'm sitting on my bed and I'm all finished with the journal. And I'm like, now what? Like, I don't want anybody to find this. Like, what do I do now? Like, it's all here written. And so I get a pen, I like go grab a pen and I open the front flap and I'm like, Dear mom and dad. And I very dramatically am like, if you find this journal, burn it. Like, don't read it, don't open it. You're not going to know what's in here. And I wrote them this whole very dramatic letter. And, you know, it was like, love, Lindsay. And when I closed it, I sat back and I'm telling you, Danny, like, I knew something within me that I was not going to burn that story, but I was going to tell it one day.
Mm,
And perhaps my family would actually love the girl on the inside of those pages.
mm.
So that's honestly what started. The freedom that I found in writing was definitely enticing to keep writing. And then yeah, the content, I was like, man, I feel like I've got something to share with the world.
Mm.
So that's kind of how it started.
And when was this? How old were you?
I so I'm guessing I was maybe 22 and I'm 30
Okay.
now. So
Mhm.
that was however many years ago, 14.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, when did you start thinking that you were going to write a book? And like, was the concept from going to be a memoir?
Well, yeah, like I would say it was kind of in that moment where I had this realization that what I had given in these pages was not this thing to be afraid of, but something to share. And as I was experiencing this freedom as I was in therapy. And so I was finding a lot of freedom in sharing my story, or parts of my story with somebody that I just didn't feel alone. And so I would say like it was in that moment that I felt like I could write a book. That was I didn't even know what a memoir was. Like, I'm telling you, I just was not in that frame of thought. And
Yeah.
so it's funny because I actually was looking in my old files on my computer and found when I had started writing, and I called it like the autobiography because that's like what I could remember in school.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we had to write these autobiographies. So it was like the autobiography of me. And then, of course, you know, the craft of it became more fluid but it took me a while to figure out what I actually was going to write, and
Mm,
to learn what a memoir was and how
mm,
it's not necessarily chronological.
mm.
It could be a time period in your life that you want to talk about. And so I would say I always knew it would be telling the story of some of these traumatic moments that I've experienced and the freedom of facing them.
Mm.
But it took me a little while to figure out how it was going to look.
Yeah. And so that was, you said like about 10 years ago when you were like, okay, I think I'm going to start turning this into an autobiography, a memoir.
Yes, yeah. So it was 10 years. I would say just started writing. That's the
Mm,
thing. Like I didn't know what it was going to be. I started writing and I just continued writing almost like the same thing over. And
mm,
then, you know, throughout that progression of years, it was like I started to figure out more about my writing style, more about
mm.
what I wanted to share. I was still discovering me. So I mean, obviously we're always still discovering ourselves. And so I felt like I was able to kind of hone in probably within the last, I think it was actually January of 2017 when I was like, okay, time to take everything that I have and turn it into a story. So,
Yeah, and like how do you even go about formatting that something like that? That feels so overwhelming to me to take all of those years of writing, journaling, and everything from kind of just probably some free writing sessions to like
yeah.
brain dump style stuff to more thought out prose, if you will. How did you even start formatting that?
So I would say the very first thing I started doing was reading a lot of memoirs, because I kind of felt like I didn't know what I was doing. I mean,
Mm,
not kind of, like I definitely didn't. And so it's like, okay, how do I turn all of these things into a story that is not like one run on or like that people care about? Because I'm not like a historical figure with this really important life that I can just write like the day I was born till present. And so I started reading memoirs, and that's what gave me kind of the context of a memoir and
Mm,
the time period. And so then I started looking at my story and thinking, um, how do I make all of these moments from childhood until now fit within the context of a story?
yeah.
And so then I had the idea, well, what if the setting is actually in the therapist office? So then I can have this like grounding place where we continue returning back to, and then stuff can kind of flow out of there. So I felt like I had to find the setting first. Where am I? What am I doing? Kind of the backbone of the story. And then it's like storyboarding. It's like, okay, what goes first? What is it? I kind of had to remove myself a little bit and make myself a character.
Yeah.
And that's what's tricky about memoir too, is because, it's you don't want to fabricate. And so you really have to dig deep. But the way that you're sharing your story doesn't have to always be in this like chronological order.
Mm.
It's kind of like it's very tricky to learn, but then I feel like once you get into it, as far as like stylistically how to write a memoir, when you find your story,
Yeah.
you know.
It kind of comes together,
Yeah,
maybe.
okay, so for instance, I was chatting with a friend who wants to start writing, and she has this really beautiful story. And there's some really hard moments with her mom, who is an addict. And it's like you have to take, so I was like, well, what story do you want to tell? Because you could look at it from several angles. Is this story about you and your mom and your relationship? Is it a story about you having to, separate yourself from your mom's identity? Like there's so many different angles you can take it. So I feel like you have to, in the same time that you're kind of finding the backbone, like where is the story taking place, you have to figure out what is your message? What do you want to
Yeah.
tell people? What do you want
Yeah.
to share about, what do you want the world to know about your story?
Yeah.
And then you kind of form it from that.
That totally makes sense for sure, and that seems like it would be one of the more difficult things maybe to pin down in this process, is getting real clarity on that, so that you can kind of move forward with clarity in writing. Maybe, I mean, once you landed on that perspective, we're gonna stay kind of grounded in the therapist's office, and that's where we'll come back to. What were your writing days kind of like, or like how often did you write? How long did you write for? When you were writing, was it kind of all over the place? I mean, I know you're a busy mom, you work, like there's a lot going on. How do you even find time to do that?
Um, I remember, I think it's Jen Hatmaker, who I love very much as a writer. I think it was her that just talked about like finding the odd hours. And that's what I did. I mean, obviously our oldest is 13. I have three children, and the youngest is 4. And so like it wasn't ever traditional in the sense of like I got up, they got them off to wherever they were going, and then I could start writing. Like my hours of writing were typically during nap time, which is like an hour and a half to 2 hours, maybe, like when my kids were napping, which really you have to get into the zone. So like that takes time. So really I had about an hour of writing time on a good nap day, right? But then it could be late at night, it could be early morning. I mean, sometimes that was frustrating because writing is a deep dive, and especially when you're writing a memoir, because you're wanting to relive these stories so that you can share with your reader the experience, right? So
But then you're also reliving these
but you're
stories.
also reliving it. Yeah. And the details like fully. And so then it's like, what do I give? And so it's just really emotionally taxing. It's very liberating, but it's also just very taxing. And so it was a deep dive. And sometimes I'd have to tell my friends, okay, or like my husband, like, okay, I'm writing, check on me in like an hour and a half, because then you have to come out of it. And then I had to be a parent. My kid woke up.
Yeah.
And so it was very unconventional, I would say. And I think maybe the second time around, I'll have a little bit more rhythm.
Mm.
I think you got to find what works. For me, it was like loud instrumental music in my ears as I wrote. Isn't that funny? Like some people need like complete silence. And I would say
Yeah.
in the editing process down the road, I needed some silence to like
Mhm.
figure things out. But as far as writing the content, I mean, it was like cinematic music in my ears, and it was the only way I could because I couldn't even hear it. It was like it's very
Mm.
weird. Like
Yeah, like ambient almost once you
yeah.
get into this. It probably, I would assume, I've never written a book, a memoir, anything, but other than songs,
Mhm.
which you're like, creating the
Yeah.
music. But yeah, I would imagine it would almost be like this meditative or trance-like place you go to. At least I know sometimes when I'm writing songs, that's how I feel when I'm in the moment. It's like you're kind of in this suspended reality for a second while you're kind of getting that creative download, is that kind of what it felt like?
It's that's exactly what it feels like. Yeah. I
Mm,
mean, you nailed it. Like it feels like a trance when you are in the flow. And so later when I was editing, I mean, there would be times I would wake up at 3 a.m. and I could
mm,
hear the sentences. Like it was it was really like it was a really cool experience because I'd never experienced that before. So like, or I'd be in the shower. And again, this is right at the end of the book being completed. And I would be in the shower and I would like hear it and I'd get out and I'd go have to like type it down.
yep.
But then because it just felt like my mind was always hearing these words and these sentences and I kind of miss that. I'm really out of practice. I mean, I'm have moved on to other stuff with the book, like promotion and stuff. But so I feel out of practice and I miss it because it was a
Mm.
very like meditative inner. I can't really explain it, but you
No,
explained it well.
it's cool because I'm laughing because it's the same exact thing with writing. Like I would wake up in the middle of the night. It doesn't happen anymore really because I don't write songs as often anymore because I've kind of, transitioned to some other professional things, but like same thing, like wake up in the middle of the night with like a song idea and just like have to sing it into your notes like quietly if you like have a
Yeah,
partner try and like wake them up, or like write it down in your notes, or yeah, you're in the shower, you're driving,
yeah.
like it's
Oh
always
yeah,
kind of
driving's
like
the worst
I
because you're
I
like, I do not
yes.
want to, but I can't. I have to get it out.
Yes, totally. I would get some of my favorite ideas when I was driving. I don't know if there's something to that. I'm sure there have been some studies done where it's like being distracted, you can kind of get into this place where
Hmm.
other things maybe float into your consciousness. I don't know what it is about that, but it's cool to hear that another form of writing is very similar to songwriting, and that it's a very similar kind of feeling and just kind of interaction with the unconscious, conscious, creative
Totally.
realm.
Yep. I think that happens in the shower too. Like,
Mhm.
because you're kind of forced, whether it's driving or you're in the shower or whatever, you're forced to just be still and like focus on the thing you're doing. And that's when I feel like your mind probably rests the most to like
Yeah.
intake all of these other beautiful things that,
Yeah.
you know, that come when we're still or when we're not, when we're feeling crazy and all of a sudden you have the thought.
Right,
Know
right,
how
for
it works,
sure.
but the like the creative whatever is like we're gonna get to you. We need you. We need this to be downloaded and used. So
Mhm.
we're gonna find a way to get it to you.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, definitely. I'm sure anyone who listens to this podcast regularly is going to be like, "Oh my God, here she goes again." But because I feel like I talk about this book almost every episode, but Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, she talks about this where she was like, there was this time I started writing this idea for this book, and then I kind of drifted away from it, and I met this other author who I ended up becoming really good friends with, and we had this email exchange going. And one day she sends me this email and she's like, "Hey, I have this concept for this book that I've started writing. Would you mind just looking over it and just give me your thoughts on it?" And she was like, "When I tell you it was the same exact book I had started writing, but had kind of deserted, same characters, same setting, same
What?
plot line." Yeah, she's like, if you abandon something and you don't listen to those moments where creativity is kind of dropping stuff on you and you don't act on it, it will find another vessel to come through. And maybe it's a little different with a memoir because it's like no one's story is like your story, right?
Sure.
But I do think that there is something energetically to staying open to ideas coming your way and really being receptive to them, being like, okay, I hear you, noted. I'm going to put this down somewhere and do
Yeah.
something with it, you know? But I always thought that was such a wild story. But I've totally seen things like that, like songs that I have like concepts I've had that I haven't like seen through, and then see other people release some business ideas I've had that I've been like, oh, that would be cool, but I don't know, maybe I'll do something with that down the line. And then I see someone else has started that business. I'm like, this is so crazy. That is 100%
Right.
true.
Yeah, and with the memoir, I felt like I couldn't not do it. Like I
Mm,
felt like I couldn't move on to anything else. And anytime I tried, because anything else would have been probably a little easier, but anytime I tried, I felt like I would just not fail at it, but it'd be so overwhelming because I knew
mm,
that I needed to write. And
yeah.
so it felt like the thing that I have to do before I can move on to anything else.
And like, what has that process been like for you? Because I would imagine writing a memoir would be similar, but also very different to writing a piece of fiction. Like you were saying, having to go into these deeper places and reliving some of this stuff. How did that kind of affect your day to day life? Because I feel like I talk with people on like a semi-regular basis who express interest in writing a memoir at some point, but maybe they're not quite there yet. And I think it would be helpful for people to kind of have this information of like, okay, what does it really look like to commit yourself to doing something like this? You know, how does it really affect you, both
Sure.
positively and maybe negatively throughout the whole process?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think even fiction writers, now I haven't written, I've been like dabbling in some short stories, but even they pull from real experiences, right? They have to
Sure.
have context that they're writing. And so I feel like I don't know how different it would be, but I think, you have to get back into like whether you're reliving a scene, or you're getting into character, trying to find your character for a fiction, or you're reliving your scene for nonfiction. I think I think it just takes like it's vulnerable because you have to let yourself go there for the sake of the story.
Mm,
But I don't know, like it's equal parts liberating and hard. Like it's
yeah.
empowering, I will say, when you finally like there were times I would write and I would like find the line and I'm like, yes! And I'm like getting like really excited in my own world. And it could be like the saddest line ever in the story, but I'm a little bit separated from it at that point because now I'm just trying to craft it to where like the reader feels it. So I think it's kind of a roller coaster, but I think creating like, writing songs can be the same way, and
Mm,
or painting or cooking or like finding like anytime you give your whole self to something, I think it can be really draining. And but that
yeah.
doesn't mean it's bad. I think it
Yeah.
just means you're pouring into the project in front of you. And that's
Yeah.
beautiful because how much art out there feels a little cheap and it
Mm,
feels a little low hanging, and it's
yeah.
where's the deep hearted stuff. So I don't know, like I would say do it. Like who if somebody's watching this or listening and thinking like I'm scared to write it, this is something that I've told another friend who wants to write. It's like the people you're afraid of reading it. Well, one, write it for yourself. Write it as if nobody's going to read it. That's what my husband told me from day one. And that's what kept me most honest. Um,
Mm,
and
it's a great
then,
point.
and then write it in that writing as if nobody's going to read it. You're free to express your true self. But by the time that it comes out into book form, you're going to have somebody else's eyes on it. So I had three editors along the way. This last one being the one that really helped me shape the whole thing. But those editors become your friends, especially in the end, when you're really close to finishing it. And so they know I'm like, hey, did I honor this person well? Like,
Mm,
because you can still share about an experience that's really hard,
yeah.
and still want to find words. There are so many words out there and so many eloquent ways we can write our stories and honor the people that are in them, whether we have trauma or whether
Mm,
it's a beautiful moment. I mean, and so I think that's where you have a trusted editor who comes in, who has your back and knows like, hey, maybe we need to change this. There was a
mm,
line in my book that would have probably been triggering for anybody who's dealt with suicide.
mm,
And she had mentioned, hey, let's reword this. And I was like, that's a like, thank you. Because
mm.
you're so deep in it that you have to have somebody else's eyes on it. So yeah, so when it's all kind of done and wrapped up, I think you have to be confident in the fact that you're not the only one whose, eyes have been on it, and you'll be ready to tell your story at that point.
Yeah, it's not like you've been just like in this bubble by yourself and just sending it out into the world. Women's health is extremely important to me, and I think modern fertility is one of the most exciting, accessible new advancements to come out in recent years to help us really understand our bodies more. Whether you're ready to pop out a mini me like yesterday, or the thought of being someone's parent after the night you had last night seems light years away, knowledge is power. Understanding how our bodies work to better be able to prepare for the future and take better care of ourselves right now is game changing. Modern fertility doesn't just offer fertility testing, it also offers birth control, prenatal vitamins, ovulation and pregnancy tests, and just launched a sperm kit. Because fertility isn't just a woman's job, okay? So click the link in the show notes for $10 off your modern fertility hormone test and join the thousands of women who refuse to let fertility be a mystery. Now, back to the show. So, I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty good experience with your publishers. It sounds like they were pretty supportive. But were there any challenging moments along the way, kind of sharing such intimate stuff with them? Was it something you got more
Oh
used to the
Lord.
more you worked together, or?
I feel like this could be a whole other podcast because the level of vulnerability truly um to give this person, and I'm speaking about just my editor, to give this person this story that's rough, this rough draft of like really hard and beautiful things, but it's like I mean, I'm giving a lot in this book, and I'm comfortable with that. But in those first drafts, it's like we might have taken some stuff out, it's like
Mm,
I might not want the whole world to know that.
mm,
And so it is a trusting process. Like, I do think to find the right editor, to find somebody who's supportive of you is huge. You have to click. Like I said, I had two before the third one, and they were really great. But there was a friendship and a connection with the third editor that made it easier to be vulnerable.
yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's really important. Publishing is a whole other thing, but I felt like I had to keep some boundaries. Like,
Mm,
I had to do a lot of self-talk, because the editing process is very, she's critiquing me for good
mm,
reason. I want her to, right? So it can be like you can feel pretty exposed.
yeah.
Had to do a lot of self-talk of like, you are good, and you're a good writer, and you're a good human, and you don't need this person's validation, and like all of that stuff, because you want their approval, because you want to
Mm,
have a good book, but you have to learn to separate that from like you as an individual,
mm,
and that takes
yes.
therapy.
Oh, girl, yes. Oh, for
it
sure.
takes it just takes a lot of like self-awareness.
Good for you for being able to have those conversations with yourself. I know it's so difficult. I've been in that position before, creatively. I know, a lot of my clients are also like songwriters, maybe younger songwriters who are, we're working on that craft, and so they're like bringing brand new songs to me, and I know it's a very similar process. I'm actually surprised at how many overlaps there are with music and
Yeah.
writing a book, because we'll have the same conversations and they'll be like, oh, this is really hard to hear. Ugh, and I'm like, I know. And it's not, it doesn't mean that like, just because I gave you this one piece of feedback does not mean that you should listen to me, right?
Right. Totally. You
Because
can always reject. You can be like, no, I don't agree.
yeah. Like, this is just, I'm giving you an opinion based on my own personal experience and taste, which is always subjective, right? But also like, it doesn't mean that just because like maybe this one thing wasn't like the best thing, it doesn't mean that you won't ever create anything worthy of adoration or joy again, you
Right.
know. But it's hard to talk having been in those experiences, always being in those experiences. I think if you're somebody who puts yourself out there a lot, I think you have to really build a relationship with that part of your psyche to have those conversations and learn not to take things like so personally and be like it's for the betterment of whatever I'm working on.
It is. It's I think a team, even if it's small, your art's always going to be something deeper because somebody else's heart was attached to it. And
Mm,
and they might not attach to it because it's obviously this is my book and it's my project, but when you have other people putting parts of themselves into it, that's really special and beautiful.
mm.
And yeah, I always think working with even just one other person, it's always going to be better than trying to do it by yourself.
How did you go about finding your publisher?
So I found my editor first.
Hmm.
She was a friend of a friend, and my friend had known she helped him edit some of his books. So we got in contact. We had like a initial phone call, and at this point, I was just paying her to be like a freelance editor.
Hmm.
So she was working for a publishing company then, but we weren't really talking about that. I was just gonna pay her on the side to edit my book. Well, I'll back up. I actually created a proposal. I kind of did it a little backwards. Like you can create a book proposal where you give a little bit of what your book's going to be about, and then you give like a few sample chapters or something, and then you don't have to have everything written. Then
Okay.
you can search for publishers there, like doing that. You can find a literary agent, they can help you find the right publisher. I did it very differently. I wrote the book first, primarily because my story is very unique. um, I have some spiritual ties to it, and I wanted to tell it the way that I wanted to tell my story. The last thing I wanted to do was find a publisher that liked parts of my story, but
Mm,
didn't like all of my story, and
yeah.
then told me what I could write about and what I couldn't. And so it was big for me that I wrote the story that I wanted to tell. And so I, at this point, was like, well, I guess I'll just print a few copies and hand them out. I didn't know what was going to happen with it.
So you
I,
were willing to just release it
yeah,
regardless of whether you had a publisher or not.
yeah, because I just knew I needed to tell it and I wanted to tell it. And so, but from the very beginning, I have said, like, I just want a good book. It's probably pride, but also just the story that I'm telling. I just wanted it to be crafted in a way that it felt bigger than me because
Mm,
it feels that way really like in real life as all of our stories I think do. But I felt like the lack, like I wouldn't be able to write it the way that it needed to be written. And so I knew I wanted to write a really good story. And so I found the editors and she worked on it. We did a first round with it. And then she went to her team and essentially was like, I think we should acquire this. And so she passed it to her team and they were on board and I went to Nashville and we had lunch and they offered me a traditional publishing deal. So that was kind of crazy. I mean, I just had no idea that that's how it would be. And
mm.
but it was really organic and unique the way that it happened. But yeah, that's kind of how I did it. I was like, well, I have the book, so all the content
Yeah.
there minus like, the editing process. But
I think that's a really good note to kind of give people is like maybe to have clarity on how you want to tell that story, which you talked about earlier in this chat, but how much you're willing to let someone else kind of influence how you're telling the story. You know, like you were like, I'm going to write this first because the main meat and potatoes of this I am willing to put out into the world anyway.
mhm.
And whereas some other people might be like, well, I'm open to a lot of like having a lot of flexibility in the creative process. So that seems like a really good point that, you know, any future memoirist should kind of keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think too when it's a memoir, it's like if this is the only book that I release, what do I want it to be? What do I
Mm,
want to say? And what do I want people to know and to learn about, not just about me, but about themselves? Like, what am I putting out there? And
yeah.
so that's why part of it too, Danny, is I just don't think I trust a lot of people. So
Mm,
I was like, I want to make sure that the content of my book is inclusive and that
yeah.
that everybody feels, not everybody's going to connect with my book, but that the people who do feel seen and loved and heard.
Mm,
And so yeah, it was important for me that I kind of had full reign on
yeah.
what I would write in there.
Love that. Well, I love that you found people you felt safe enough to do that with who like really supported you in this process. I mean, and since it's been finished, and there was a release date that was set, what has the promotional process been like for you? Like, is it something that you I mean, I know the answer to this on a personal level, but is it something you enjoy? Have you grown to kind of accept it or enjoy it more? Yeah.
So I don't enjoy it. Okay, I should back up. What I enjoy most is writing. And I enjoy being, I like my little desks that I write at are nothing fancy. The first one that I wrote at a long time ago was like a little closet. And I like being in my own space. It's a safe space for me. And so that part is not the easy part, but it's like that's the part I feel most comfortable in. What I am not comfortable in, but that doesn't mean it's bad, is the promotion of it. It's reaching out for endorsements. It is like all the stuff that goes into that everybody has to do
Mm.
to release your book. It's the world that we live in. And so it's been exhausting, I will say, but I know I'm not alone. I can't imagine anybody not feeling this way, unless you just thrive in the marketing world and sales. And some people do, like my husband. He's great at that, but that's just not the way my brain works. And so I've definitely had to deal with some insecurity of like, am I going to say the right thing? If I reach out for endorsement, are they going to think I'm using them? Like, I mean, it is, again, it's that self-talk of like, this is part of it. And I believe in my story. And people can say yes and they can say no, or they can say maybe, but you get to just ask the question.
Mm.
So I do think I've had to be more gentle with myself in this part of the process because I definitely don't feel confident in it as far as what I'm posting on Instagram. And they're like, you need TikTok. And I'm like, I don't want TikTok. I don't know how to do TikTok, but I don't feel as qualified. But again, it's just all vulnerability. And it's like, okay, this is just part of like the next steps in the next process. Like I'm speaking for the first time in this week. And I'm like, I can't do that. And I'm like, okay, if I keep that narrative, I'm not going to be able to do any of this.
Mm.
So I can do it. I'm
Mm-hmm.
scared and I'm nervous, but that's okay.
Well,
Like
we
I
do
can
it
show
scared,
up.
right?
We do. Yeah. And like that is actually starting to click. Like that's
Mm.
been like a brain, like I've known that. Like we can do hard things. We do it when we're scared.
Now you're just the universe is giving you the opportunity
Not
to
like
practice it.
shit. Yeah. Now I'm like, oh my God, now I gotta really do, like I have to show up. And like right before this, you and like I love you so much and I was nervous. So I had to do like the box breathing. I'm like, I am fine. Like
You're
this is
doing
gonna be
great.
fine. But you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
new. It's just
Yeah.
very new. And like there's going to be people who just don't get it, and that's okay. And there's going to be people that just rip me apart because they want to rip somebody apart. And then there's going to be people who feel seen and loved, and it's all a part of it. And so
Mm.
it's learning how to, in the promotion or whatever, it's just learning how to stay centered
Yeah.
and not let the approval or the disapproval like wipe you out either
Whew.
way.
The facts. Straight facts. I mean, it again,
Like easier said than done,
so
but
much easier said than done. But again, like I think one more parallel to music, it's when I was releasing stuff independently, it was that same thing. Like being at a keyboard, writing songs felt like my safe place. It felt very comfortable, and then doing the promotional stuff to try and get that music out into the world, and like asking other people to believe in what I was doing was a part that was like ugh, just like the worst, you know? And it's interesting now putting those skills into something like this podcast because for some reason I have an easier time promoting this than I did music. And I don't know if that's because the music just felt like so personal to me,
Yeah.
or if I maybe somewhere inside of me feel like this project needs to reach more people because I think it's really important to encourage people to do the things they've always been wanting to do but maybe have been
Yeah.
afraid to do. And I think that that's such an important thing that I think deep down I know I can't let my fear of being rejected by someone or not putting it out into the world kind of win, you
Yeah.
know? And not that like the music I was writing, not that I didn't feel that way either, but I think maybe it was good practice for this. So I think too, it can be a muscle that you can learn to strength train in. The more
Yeah.
you do it, the more you're like, okay, I know what it feels like to write this email. I know what it feels like to get a no. I know what it feels like to get a yes. I know what it feels like to get a yes that turns into a no. I know, you know,
And when your
and
friend gives you a no, that's
yeah.
that's and not taking it personal, that's been
Hmm.
something I've learned, separating the personal from the business.
Yeah, that's so tough too. I think especially as women, like there's a lot of like accommodating things that we do or that we expect maybe from female friends as well. And this could just be my own personal experience, like framing this, but I feel like it almost feels like it hurts a little bit more when it's coming from like a female friend that's a no or something, because it feels like, oh, but like we would do anything for each other. So why wouldn't we do this? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, it has to make sense, you know?
Yes, I know. That's self-talk again.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
always moments to grow and befriending yourself in this
Mm,
process and like truly letting all of those like Instagram quotes we love and like things and books we like underline, like actually letting that stuff sink in
yes.
and living by it and not just having it as head knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. I think, yeah, trying to recognize those conversations you need to have with yourself in real time,
Hmm.
yeah, are so important for sure. Well, I am so excited for this book to get out in the world. Like, what are your sort of hopes and dreams for this book?
Um, I don't know. Like that is a question. I don't know if this is going to reach many or if it's just going to reach one.
Mm,
I think my hope has always been to write it, to feel good about it, to have something that I've created that I'm really proud of. And so, I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I don't want it to reach, millions. Like
mm,
obviously it would be really cool. But I don't know. I'm still wrestling with that because on one hand, I want it to be the art that it is and just put it out there and like just let people connect with it as like kind of let it be a slow build and then on the other hand, it's like, well, the world that we live in requires money, requires like, this way of life. I have 3 kids. Like, I'm like, I want to contribute. I want to be able to um, get paid for the art that I do so that I can
mm.
do more and I can
Yeah.
provide for my family. And so obviously if this is a big hit, then, I might see a little bit of money where I can like take my kids on a little trip or something.
Hmm.
Like I've just never been able to do that. Like
Mm,
I mean, my husband has,
hmm.
but as far as me bringing in something monetary to our
Mm,
family, so that feels good. But I also
yeah.
like I know that that's not everything, and I know that art can stand on its own without making any profit. And so I don't know. I just hope that people connect with it. I hope it reaches many. I think what I would love to do because of the book is to just meet more people,
Mm,
to get in front of people or to sit at tables with people and just talk. Like, I think that's what I love to do, just to connect with others.
Yeah.
I don't really know the answer, but maybe just a deeper connection.
I see that happening.
Yeah.
I definitely do. I think it's such a beautiful book. It's a hard book. It feels very real, very honest. Even though we've had like very different life experiences, there are some things that we have, overlapped, and I just felt so deeply
Yeah.
reading it. And I think that a lot of people will connect to it. That's just my opinion because,
Well, I
I
like
love you and I think you're
that.
talented and I think everyone should read it. But yeah, so okay, it's coming out January 30th,
Maybe first.
31st,
Justin
2023.
Timberlake's birthday.
Hey!
That's how we can all remember
Right.
little Lindsey Frazier's book is coming out on Justin Timberlake's birthday.
Perfect, perfect. It's Oh Love Come Close. And where can people pre-order and follow you?
Sure. I mean, if you follow me on Instagram at Lindsey Frazier, you will find a lot of stuff there regarding the book. But you can order it Barnes and Noble. You could order it, pre-order on Amazon. You can pre-order it on Bookshop, which is really cool because they support local bookstores. So
Cool.
it's kind of interesting the way that you find it. You can search the shop first that you want to support. So I can support several. So like lately when I've been ordering them, I've been kind of switching it up. So like I'll do a local shop. There's one here in Indy called Irvington Vinyl and Book, and I'll search that. And then whatever book I buy, like part of it will go towards the bookshop.
Cool.
Or I've done like Parnassus in Nashville,
Hmm.
which you can actually pre-order through Parnassus because they are carrying inventory of the book. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So if you want to support a bookshop and you don't like live in that area, like a local bookshop, you can go to bookshop.org and
Amazing.
pre-order it from there. So yeah, I mean, as much as I love Prime, Amazon Prime, I would encourage everybody to pre-order from a local spot or
For sure.
bookshop.org first.
For sure. We love our mom and pop shops. We love shopping local.
Yes,
Okay.
we
Jeff
do.
Bezos doesn't need any more of our money.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, girl, I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. It's been so
Thank you so
cool
much.
just like watching you go through this process and like challenging yourself and believing in yourself. And the book is incredible. And I'm so excited for people to get their eyeballs on it. And thank you so much for making time to be on the show today.
I'm thrilled that you asked. This has been super fun.
I met Lindsey back when I used to teach piano lessons. She was actually one of my students, and I just knew that we were going to be friends. And as I'm sure you can tell by listening to and watching her, she loves people so much. And one of the driving forces behind her deciding to share her story has been to help someone who might read it feel less isolated in their experience. And I know it's going to accomplish that goal. Oh Love Come Close comes out on January 31st, and you can pre-order it on Bookshop, a very cool website that lets you support a local shop of your choosing, Parnassus in Nashville, and of course, Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Right now, if you go to Lindsey's site, www.lindseyfrazier.me/book, and Lindsey's name is spelled Lindsey, Frazier is Frazier. So if you go to lindseyfrazier.me/book to pre-order, Lindsey has a couple of really cool gifts she's giving out in the way of limited edition prints of her poetry and a 4-song EP of songs inspired by the book created by her and her friend Nashville producer Adam Agen. If you want to keep up with Lindsey, you can do that on Instagram at Lindsey Frazier and on TikTok at Lindsey_Frazier. You can follow me on Instagram at Danny Official. That's DAANI Official. And on TikTok at FTFE Pod. First time for everything pod. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on new episodes. And if you could rate and leave us a kind review to help people find the show, that would be very cool of you. And I'm sure would give you lots of good karma points to start 2023 off right. First Time for Everything is produced by Two Sheilas Productions, and our theme song Closer is performed by me, written by me and my friends at the Royal Foundry, and produced by the Royal Foundry. Thank you guys so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late for your first time.
walking in the running. Don't know if all my feet feel something.